Hi, it's Simon from Adelaide Walker here. I'm going to do a video for you today about the assembly of an Ashford table loom. The one I'm going to use is an 8-shaft 24-inch loom, just because that's the one that we had. We did another video, which some of you may have seen, about putting together a rigid heddle loom, which lots of people, surprising number of people in fact, seem to find useful. So we thought we'd have a go at this one as well. This is a little bit more complicated, as we're going to find out. You need a broadly similar set of tools, so you need a hammer, Phillips screwdriver, rubber mallet. Ashford say that you should lubricate the screws with a candle. Those of you who remember the 70s, remember miners' strikes probably still have some candles, but if you don't, and I think it's easier anyway, then a little bit of Vaseline or petroleum jelly if you come from somewhere where Vaseline is not sold. And I have a small piece of wood here, just the use of which will be made clear later on. There are 20 steps in the Ashford assembly guide that comes with the loom, and I'm going to kind of follow those so you can kind of read along with me or follow along if you're trying to do it yourself. As I say, 20 steps is quite a lot, so I'd also recommend, apart from tools, having a drink and some snacks. Alright, so enough talk, here we go. Okay, so step one, here we go. So the first step is assembling the castle that sits on top of the loom, and you need two castle sides. In this particular loom, they are not the same. One's got an Ashford logo and one hasn't. And you will see that they both have a little hole just on one end, on one side. I'll say that again, they've got two holes on one side and only one hole on the other side. The two holes should both face towards you. So you could do it like that, I guess, in which case it would be wrong. So you need to have the two sides facing you. And then these are going to be attached to these, and I can't remember what they're called. They are called bottom cross rails, which are these long square section pieces. They have a countersunk hole at either end into which the screw head goes, and then there is the castle top there that fits amazingly on the top of it. So I'm going to do that bit first, I think. So you need, for this you need the little brown screws that come in 3 lengths. You need 4 of the shortest length and all 4 of the middle length. If that sounds confusing, there is quite a useful little diagram on the instructions which shows you the length of the screws that you need, and if you can see, the screw is exactly the same size as the diagram. Okay, so what did I say I was going to do first? I said I was going to do the top first, didn't I? So we need to make sure that's the right way round. So these holes on the edge, no holes on that edge, need to be facing me. And I'm going to use my middle length 1.5 inch screws. So just going to put a little bit of Vaseline on that. So you do want to make sure that the screw heads are at least flush with the surface, so that they're not sticking out and snagging anything. That's lovely. So now I'm going to put my first, still can't remember what they're called, bottom cross rail onto the front. So this is with the shortest screw, 1.25 inches. The back bottom cross rail. It does say in the instructions that you are better off not using an electric drill or electric screwdriver, which is probably right, because the risk is then that you'll end up just over tightening it and cracking something. So that seems pretty sensible to me. There we go. So that is step one. Okay, so step number two is just to put these little plastic grommets onto the lever frame. I'm probably using the wrong word there. What do they call it? Castle front, they call it. There you go, castle front. Seems like there's an obvious potential for error here. You do not want your plastic grommets on the same side as your levers. You want them on the other side, because that's where the cords are going to go through. And this is easiest done by just holding that flat on the edge of a table, and then I was going to say gently tapping them in, but tap them in as hard until they are until this little rim is flat on the surface. Obviously, if you're building a 4 shaft, you'll only have 4 of these. There we go. And that's step 2. That's an easy one. Okay, section 3, part 3. We're going to put the castle front onto the castle frame that we made in the last 2 sections. So this just sits on there, and we're going to put 3 of the short screws in on either side. It's probably easiest if you put, I think, the 2 outer screws on first. And then it all just sits in the right place. So I'm just again making sure that the screw heads are flush with the surface. There we go, so that's 6 screws, and then we've got 2 of these little cotter pins that just fit into these holes on the end of the castle front. That. And that is part 3. Okay, so part 4. So this is the 2 sides of the loom, and it rather encouragingly on the instructions says we've done this part for you, and mostly they have. So if I'm facing the loom this up, if I'm facing the loom as I've got it now, then the 2 knobs for the beams I want to be on the right hand side, because I'm right handed. If you're left handed, then you can put them on the other side. So if you're on the right hand side, then they're all already installed, and all you have to do is pull off these little wooden bits. Fortunately on this one I want it on the right hand side, so I'm laughing. If you do want to put your knobs on the left hand side, then I think that's a bit tricky. You'd have to either get that out or put a nut, or get a replacement one and put it into that hole and that hole on the left hand side. I'm not going to try and pull that out, because this one, as I said, is the right way round. But if you do want your the knobs on the left hand side rather than the right hand side, then I think that's what you need to do. but we're good to go, so that's part 4 done. All right, here we go with step number 5. And I have to say, the first time I read this, it terrified the living daylights out of me. So what we're actually doing with a couple of these 1-inch hex head bolts is we are putting them into that little hole there, and that little hole there, and the one on the other side. You'll see that those holes are round, so what we are doing is putting a hexagonal head in a round hole, and it doesn't fit loosely. So I'm going to put that in there with that just over the edge of the table, and I'm going to hit it with a hammer. This is the scary bit, folks. So here we go. I may need a bigger hammer. That's not quite as bad as I might have thought it was. Now if you keep going, you're going to end up whacking the end of your the end of the back of the side of the loom, and a nice little hammer impression in it. This does need to go, I should say before doing that, it does need to go flush, because otherwise the clicker pull will catch on it. So it does need to go flat, and this is why I bought my piece of wood. Any timber will do. As you can hear, it does take a bit of doing before it goes in. Okay, I'm going to call that one done. That was fun, wasn't it, folks? And then again on the other side. Again until it's nice and flat. Alright, that's the slightly hairy step 5. Step 6 then, you need some of these, what length are they? They are 1.5 1.25 machine screws, which is the silver ones with the domed head, and we're going to attach these. They're called clicker pull, P-A-W-L. I don't think I've ever heard that word before messing with looms, but there you go. These need to go on the side that you want the handles to be, at the risk of saying something obvious. So for this one, it needs to be on the right hand side of the loom, and the screw needs to go through the inside, as it were, of the loom, and then this needs to be the right way around as well. So it needs to be, if this is the back, with the lever down and then towards the centre, and then that screws in there. So I'm going to go most of the way, and then I have a little tip for you. So because this plastic clicker pull needs to move fairly easily, you don't need to do this screw up super tight. What it actually says in the instructions is leave 0.5 millimetre gap. Now, that's not the easiest thing, I think, to estimate. So here's my tip. Take a piece of standard office paper, fold it in half 3 times, and then just use that as a little depth gauge there. I've almost overdone it myself there, having said that. There we go, so that's just loose, and then that should move, as you can see, quite easily. I should have said, when you put this pull on, you need to make sure that the little nail-like object is inside, if you can see, inside that aperture there in it, because that then clicks and locks and unlocks like that. Okay, so that's the back and that's the front. Same thing again. Machine screw through from the back, and then this needs to go down and towards the front of the loom towards the middle of the loom, I should say. Screwdriver right. Put up. So another of our 1/2 inch gaps. And again, that moves quite easily. If it's too tight, then just loosen your screw back off and it'll be fine. Okay, so that's section 6. Okay, so this is section 7, and in section 7 we are going to attach the 2 sides together, the front and back beams and the rollers. Okay, so all that's going to fit together. I think the best way of doing it is like this. So start with the side that hasn't got the handles on it. Okay, so that is my left hand side, and doesn't really matter whether you start with the back or the front beam, but whichever one you do start, you'll see that these are rounded at one end and square at the other, and the round end needs to face out, kind of in line with that rounded bit on the edge of the side. Okay, so in this case we need the longest screws, all 8 of them. I'm going to do this side first. Okay, so that is the back beam. Alright, and now for the front one. So again, making sure that my rounded side of the beam is facing out. There we are. So that's one side done. So that, in my case, is my left hand side. Now we're going to put the rollers in. There's no difference between the front and back roller, but there is a difference between the 2 ends of the rollers. You'll see that that one is just round on the end, and that one has got a kind of squared off one, and that is the end onto which the cog fits. So that needs to be on the same side as you fixed your clicker pulls, etc. Which in my case is the right hand side. The reason I think this is the easy way to do it, the easier way to do it, is if you follow the instructions and try and do all this at once, then it all falls apart and you get upset. So to avoid that, that's why I put one end of these front and back beams on first. So I think the easiest way is to stand this up on its end and then one beam, 2 beams, and then fit the other side over the beams, and it's starting to look a bit like a loom, isn't it? That looks pretty good. They are quite tight, I warn you now, these screws. Alright, so that's all the screws done. It feels like I've done this in the most awkward position, and if I look ungainly then I feel it, but I'm just doing it like this because it makes it easier for you to see what's happening. So feel free to not not have your loom set up in exactly this position when you're putting it together. I'm hoping in fact that my facial expressions whilst putting in these rather tight screws are not on the video, but we shall see when we come to edit it. So that is finally section 7. So this is section 8, and the first part of section 8 is to put these little rubber feet with these small machine screws on the bottom of the loom. So they all screw in. There we are, that's our 4 rubber feet. So this is the second part of section 8, and what we're doing is fitting these support arms over the bolt that we hammered through earlier, so that they pivot up and down like that. Now the 2 support arms are the same, but you will see that the hole is not equidistant from the end, and the hole needs to be nearer the front of your loom. So it needs to fit like that, and then just a washer and a bolt. And again, this doesn't want to be too tight. I'm missing this spanner. My loom comes with 2 spanners, both of which are the same size. I'm not quite sure where that should be at this point, but never mind. So I'm just going to tighten that up so that again we've got our 1/2 mil space. It's a bit loose at the moment. So that's good. And then again on the other side. So shorter distance to the front. Without checking, we'll call that one done. So there we go, and those are our 2 support arms. So this is section 9, where we put in the cogs on the ends of our beams. So the cog just fits. It's easier if you have the clicker pull pulled away from it. The cog just fits over there. It's quite a tight fit. There we go. And then one of these big round washers and a 1-inch machine screw. I've lost my screwdriver. It's easiest if you hold the beam, not as I was doing there, the cog. That's much better. This one does need to be quite tight, because obviously the cog needs to hold the beam in place. If it doesn't go on one way, then I'd recommend trying it the other way. So this is section 10, and all we're doing on this one is fitting the handle like that on the outside of the cogs. So those pins on the inside of the handle need to fit into these 4 holes on the cog. My experience with doing this on a rigid heddle loom is that you end up hurting your hand, really. It does say use a rubber mallet on this one, and it also recommends just a bit of lubrication on those pins. So I've just smeared a bit of Vaseline on those. And I think the way to do it is to just sit it in so it's going in. Actually, this is going to go in fine, I think. And then with your rubber mallet, not with your hammer, hit it like that. So there should not be a gap, as indeed there isn't here, between the handle and the cog, if that makes sense. That one went better than I thought it was going to. Let's see if we can repeat it on the second bit. just as an aside, it is possible to, if you break these or put them on the wrong side, it is possible gently to prise them out without breaking them. Not that you should need to do that, but if you do, and it has happened, then it is possible. So line them up. I'm finding that if I just push it gently, it's locating enough, and then a more confident tap gets it in that time. So that's our handles done. That's number 10. We're halfway there.